We know what you're thinking. Maruti already has a rival to the Hyundai Creta. It's called the Grand Vitara and it's been around since 2022. So why then has it launched a second one? The answer is actually a whole lot simpler than you think, as it turns out. I'm Gavin, this is Autocar India. It is absolutely roasting here in Rajasthan and I'm going to take you on a drive of this, the Maruti Suzuki Victoris. The answer actually lies in the showroom. As you probably know, the Grand Vitara is sold from Maruti's premium Nexa outlets, but there aren't as many of those as Maruti's Arena outlets. In fact, for every one Nexa showroom in India, there are roughly 6 Arena showrooms. And in order to take on the mighty Creta, Maruti needs as wide a reach as possible. So, is it just a numbers game then? Maruti insists it's quite a bit more, that this Victoris is considerably different from the Grand Vitara. And by looking at it at least, I'm inclined to agree. Now I'm going to need you guys to go down into those comments and sound off about what you think this car looks like, because ever since it's been revealed, there have been quite a few mixed feelings about the design and styling of the Victoris. So what do we think? Well, personally, from the front at least, I kind of like it because it's a nice welcome departure from the overly crazy designs that have been coming out from a lot of cars lately. Including the Grand Vitara in my opinion, which I'm not so sure about its split headlamp design and its slightly frumpy looking front. This, however, is a lot simpler and a lot more neutral. I think it has a wider appeal. Some people have compared it to a Volkswagen. I don't deny that. There is a bit of that in there. And I certainly like these DRLs that do have a hint of Audi about them. Other than that, you will notice some nice details that seem to have been borrowed from cars like the e-Vitara, like this mostly blanked off front end with the intakes being lower down. These fog lamps are a bit odd actually because they are projectors. Yes, they are LEDs, but they kind of just reflect all over the place when they're on at night. These intakes, they are functional. They let air in through the wheel arches, and yeah, that is not an LED DRL, it's just a strip of brushed metal. The tyres, incidentally, are 215/60 R17 Cheya Secura drive, and Maruti tells us that these have a relatively low rolling resistance, which helps contribute to that excellent fuel economy figure, as does the aerodynamic shape of this car, which is a little bit better than the Grand Vitaras. The most polarizing angle of the Victoris, I think, is the rear, because while it has some cool touches like that shark fin antenna, this spoiler and this cool bar of LEDs. In fact, the entire tail lamp cluster is contained in here, just the reverse lights are down there, but even the indicators are included in this really slim panel. I think that's very good. What people don't seem to agree on is this incredibly flat and vertical surface. It just doesn't mesh well and looks a little bit cheap compared to the rest of the execution. Incidentally, this is the strong hybrid version, and ordinarily you'd find a spare tire underneath there, but no, this car doesn't have a spare tire. In fact, none of them do. The Victoris comes without a spare tire, only a puncture repair kit. We asked Maruti about this and they said that if you really want, you can buy a spare tire as an accessory, but only in the petrol and strong hybrid versions. In the CNG variant, it is not an option. And as with the Grand Vitara, the hybrid boot is considerably smaller thanks to the battery underneath and seriously limits the amount of bags you can carry. The petrol version has a much larger boot with an empty space under the floor, whereas in the CNG version, that space is taken up by the CNG tank. From the driver's seat, at first glance, it doesn't seem like a lot has changed. This is all very familiar if you've been in a modern upmarket Maruti Suzuki product lately, and that's because the general layout of things is pretty much the same. I mean, there's a freestanding touchscreen that flows down into a cascading center console. There's this shelf over here and even a flip-up HUD at the top of the instrument binnacle. And join me in saying happy 20th birthday to these window switches. They've really been around for a long time. And actually, it's disappointing that a lot of switchgear is carried over from older Maruti Suzuki models, like these stalks, some of these buttons over here, and these age-old switches, releases rather, for the bonnet and the fuel filler cap. It really just dates this car when otherwise things look really modern. Maruti has also insisted on sticking with this rather basic looking and feeling roof liner, and there's not a whole lot of storage in this car. Yes, there is a wireless charger here, a small cubby here with the USB ports, two really tiny cup holders, not a lot of space in this cubby hole, and only decent sized glove boxes and door pockets. But those things aside, there's a lot to like about this cabin, so let's talk about that. For one, I like that they've put a big chunk of soft touch material right here in your line of sight. It really uplifts the perceived quality of this cabin and might make you forget that up here is all hard plastic. There's also this strip of piano black trim that actually has backlighting built into it. You can set the ambient lighting color, and I suppose if you choose a color that suits you, it might look quite nice. And generally the quality in here has taken a step up apart from those old switches. Like the steering wheel, it's a new design. It's got loads of piano black buttons all over it, and I will never complain about too many buttons again because I take the functionality over all else. Even here they've got physical buttons to control the ADAS. You don't have to go into loads of menus. You can just hit a shortcut and turn off things like forward collision warning if you don't want to use it. I particularly love this little set of buttons right here. I know I'm going on a bit, but it is truly a good piece of design. It's borrowed from the Vitara EV. It's your AC controls, there are toggle switches over here, and this lovely rubberized knob for the volume. Very simple, but works just so well and so great to use. Down here, as always, you'll find this is the all-wheel drive version, so you'll find the 4x4 system controls over there. And in this car, you get an electronic parking brake. In the hybrid, you get a physical parking brake. And here you get the cool seats as well. Now, speaking of the seats, they are part fabric and part leatherette, which I really like because, yeah, where your back and backside lie is fabric, so that if it gets too hot and you're a bit sweaty, you don't feel uncomfortable there. But the sides are leatherette, so that feels upmarket. Both seats are ventilated, as I mentioned, but the driver's seat is powered. And yeah, this car gets white on black upholstery, which I think might be a pain to keep clean. But the hybrid versions get all black upholstery and a nice bronze detailing over here rather than brushed aluminium. I think I prefer that one a little bit better. But on to the big change, and that's the tech, and it all centers around these two screens right here. In front of me is a new 10.25-inch digital driver's display, and I mean completely digital. It's not part digital like you got in the Grand Vitara hybrid. It's all digital in all top models of the car. It goes all the way to the sides. There aren't too many configurations, just two in each variant. It looks a little bit different in the hybrid and in the ICE models, but it is crisp and clear and very easy to read. I just wish it was a little bit brighter. Then there's this screen. It's moved up from 9 inches to 10.1 inches, and as a result, you don't get as big bezels as you used to in the previous system. But it's new hardware and it's new software too. Maruti calls it SmartPlay Pro X, I believe, and yeah, it is a whole lot sharper and slicker than the previous units. Kudos for that. It's got a lot more features too, a lot more connectivity. It's got a PM 2.5 filter built into it. It's also got apps this time that you can operate from the screen, from your smartphone and from your smartwatch if you so desire. And of course, it's got the general Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which are both wireless. And another feature that Maruti is really bullish on is the new 8-speaker Infinity by Harman sound system with a subwoofer in the back. It's also got Dolby Atmos built in, which gives you nice surround sound. And I listened to it in action and it sounds pretty good.
Alexa, play music.
With that, let's look at the full features list of the Maruti Suzuki Victoris. Now, features is something Maruti has gone at with full force, with the goal of taking on Hyundai at its own game. To that end, it has even more features than its own more expensive Nexa sibling, the Grand Vitara. We've already talked about the Infinity sound system, digital dials, and the PM 2.5 air purifier. And other than that, it remains well equipped with the likes of ventilated front seats, a powered driver's seat, a panoramic sunroof, surround camera, electronic parking brake, as well as 6 airbags as standard across the range. The other big news is that this is the first Maruti ever to get ADAS. And we'll test this out a bit later on the road. And this greater focus on safety has allowed the Victoris to achieve 5-star ratings in both Bharat NCAP and Global NCAP crash tests, which should silence the social media naysayers. And with that, let's head out onto the road to see if the Victoris feels like a different car to drive. If there's a weak point to the Maruti Suzuki Victoris, it is its powertrain lineup. And I mean that quite literally, unfortunately. Yes, there's a lot of choice on offer. You get the 1.5 mild hybrid petrol in either 5-speed manual or 6-speed automatic guys, or 6-speed automatic with all-wheel drive. And that same engine can also run on CNG. And then there is the Stong hybrid, which is known for its incredible fuel efficiency in the likes of the Grand Vitara and the Toyota Hyryder. The one I'm driving right now is the mild hybrid all-wheel drive automatic, and it makes just 103 horsepower. And in this segment, in this day and age, that just feels a little too little. And I'm not just talking about on paper figures either. In the real world, especially out here on the highway, it does feel weak. Overtaking is a chore, and though the gearbox does its best to accommodate, you really have to strain this engine to make overtakes. Around town, I suppose it's not that bad, and that's really down to the fact that this car is quite light, but loaded up with people and things to its maximum capacity, and I suppose the engine will strain again. As with on the highway, in town as well, the 6-speed automatic does a great job of working around the engine's shortcomings and weakness, and at least giving you a smooth driving experience. At low revs, it is a pretty refined engine. You won't hear too much of it, especially around town, but out here on the highway, you will hear it because you do have to rev it out to get the most out of it. And you should note that there's nothing wrong with a naturally aspirated petrol engine, even in this segment. I mean, many of its rivals do offer it. It's just that this one does feel particularly weak in most situations, and it should have been stronger. Or better yet, Maruti Suzuki should have found a way to offer some sort of turbocharged option. There will be some that argue that this is a Maruti and that's not what Marutis are about. But if you're tackling one of the hottest segments around right now, you do need to offer buyers that option. One way to get more out of this engine is by dropping it down into manual mode and using these paddle shifters to operate the gearbox. They respond quickly enough, and before you know it, you're in a low gear, and here's where the revs get truly unpleasant. It takes a while to rev out, but at least it holds on to gears. Yeah, it's not the most pleasant experience, and I don't recommend it. This is a great automatic gearbox on its own, and it's best to leave it to its own devices. There's another thing we should test out, and that is ADAS. This is the first Maruti Suzuki ever to get ADAS. And interestingly, it's only available on the automatic with the mild hybrid petrol engine. That's right, you don't get it on the Stong hybrid or the manual. And since we are in an automatic mild hybrid, let's test it out. This is a pretty well marked road, and if I try to stay across the line, there is a mild tug at this steering wheel. I like that. It's not too aggressive. It lets you know it's there without overcorrecting. And that's what you want from a good ADAS system. The blind spot monitors are also working well, showing me exactly if there's someone in my mirror. And if I turn on adaptive cruise control, well, it will follow the lane quite eagerly. And let's set a distance to the car in front. My foot is off the accelerator and it's slowing down nice and predictably. And now this is not something I ever want to have to test, but yes, if you do get too close, it does put on the brakes quite hard. Not aggressive, but just enough to remind you that yeah, you're getting very close and I'm going to avoid an accident right now. What's really cool is that it's displayed very nicely in the heads-up display. You get all the information. It's got a couple of colors as well, so it's not too mundane. And yeah, not too distracting, but it tells you everything you want to know in there. All in all, the calibration of the ADAS is well suited to Indian conditions. Good at sensing danger, but not too quick or harsh to react. Good job for Maruti's first ever ADAS car for India. Now, while we haven't encountered a lot of twisty roads or sharp corners here in Rajasthan, I can tell you already that this car probably isn't going to be the sharpest handler. Apart from prior experience with other Marutis on this platform, there's just a vagueness to this steering that you can't quite get around. There is weight, don't get me wrong, so you don't feel completely lost at high speeds, but that engagement, that connection is just not there. It also feels quite top heavy, although I will say the suspension is nice and controlled and it doesn't feel floaty, which is a bonus. Before making a pit stop, we thought we'd check out the backseat because mid-size SUVs are sometimes bought as chauffeur-driven vehicles in our market. Like everything up front, being in the rear seat is also a familiar experience if you've been in a Grand Vitara and tried that out, and that's for better and for worse. For one, the good thing is that you sit really high up, you get a great view forward that is somewhat impeded by this giant headrest placed in front of you. It does still feel commanding and you sit nice and upright, which is nice. The seat too is pretty comfy. It's thickly padded and that feels good. And also knee room is decent, although you do feel quite high up. Therefore, it doesn't feel like you're stretching out, but rather that you're sitting up in a high chair. You'll also notice that your feet make contact with the lithium-ion battery under the front passenger seat if you're sat over here. The bad news is that headroom is not great. To be honest, I can manage just fine. I'm just under 5'8", and that's sort of set to my driving position, but anyone taller would be quite close to the headliner there. Now, this might have something to do with the frame of the sunroof because, yeah, it is a panoramic sunroof, and quite uniquely, even though it's not particularly wide, I mean, sitting where I am, half my view forward is frame, but it does actually open both its glass panels, not just the first one. So yeah, while it doesn't open all the way till here, it does open quite a bit further back than most panoramic sunroofs. That's quite unique. It's not particularly wide either, and if you had to squeeze a middle passenger, things would be quite tight for 3 people in the back here. And yeah, a set of sun blinds over here would have been nice, just to add that slightly premium feel and block the sun out on a long drive. Still, you do get a pair of USB Type-C ports and a set of AC vents over there, as well as 2 really tiny and shallow cup holders. All things considered then, among the mid-size SUVs, not the one to pick if chauffeur-driven usage is your priority. Refinement is, well, okay. I can hear quite a bit of the road from outside, but the powertrain itself is pretty silent. Both the petrol one as well as the strong hybrid in particular, of course, because it's largely running on electric power. But when you're cruising, you can't hear too much of the engine back here, although road noise does come in from time to time on a rough surface. Speaking of rough surfaces, let's talk about ride quality. It is definitely firm, and you can feel that over bad patches of road. This car's relative lightweight also enhances that because you do tend to move around quite a bit more because the car isn't weighed down as much. And all things considered, a softer ride might have made this a little bit more enjoyable from behind the wheel. Of course, the firmer ride does have its benefits at high speed, and also when you're off-roading, I suppose. It lets you feel a little bit more controlled. But for general everyday use, I think a softer ride would have been better. Speaking of off-roading, yes, as this is one of the few all-wheel drive SUVs in this segment, Maruti set up an off-road course to show us its capabilities. I honestly thought it would be only simple stuff, but it actually proved quite impressive. The Victoris uses Maruti Suzuki's All Grip Select. That's the medium level of All Grip in Suzuki speak, and that's plenty enough for a crossover like this. The 360-degree cameras come in handy to show you what you need to avoid, like on this very rocky thing that might pass off as some people's daily commute. But this is something it can handle in auto mode, no problem. Here's the really interesting bit. It is a descent of about, 28 degrees? 28 degrees. It looks ridiculously sharp. I'm going to attempt it again in auto mode. Good approach angle there. Now for the crawl up and out of the pit. Snow mode on slippery surfaces such as this loose mud ensure that traction is maintained, not even the slightest bit of hesitation, which is quite impressive. Deeper potholes, bigger ruts, and now we're putting a wheel off the ground. What I'm impressed at with this generation of all grip is that it's actually very, very smooth. There used to be a lot of shudders and resistance from the system, but these days just transitions so easily. And finally, a 25-degree side dip. Let's see how this goes. Always a bit disconcerting to have the ground right here outside your window. But if the car's giving you confidence, you're okay. Now as we dip over into the other side, traction control should do its thing. There we go. Drop it down. And again, stiff chassis, good suspension means you're not wobbling all over the place even at this angle. While Maruti only has some of the variants for us to try out today, one of them we simply had to sample was the Stong hybrid, because although it's not the most popular choice, it certainly is the most impressive. It too comes with a meek power output of about 115 horsepower in total between the electric motor and the engine, which is again nothing to write home about. But there's a far greater urgency to this car than the 1.5 mild hybrid. You can change to eco and power modes, but frankly I feel the regular mode is the best one, and it still never fails to amaze me just how much EV power it uses in everyday driving. It's constantly filling the drive-in with electric power and just supplementing the engine, and it really does feel like the engine is only there for a very small part of the time, and that's even out here on the highway. Trouble is, once that engine does come to life, it does sound quite coarse. That's a little bit annoying. So weirdly, refinement is much better at low speeds, but the moment the engine comes on, it's a whole lot louder than the standard 1.5 petrol. And the fuel efficiency numbers it delivers are nothing short of amazing. I mean, right now it's showing about 12.8 because we've been mercilessly leaving this car on and idling while we do our shoot. Sorry about that. But even in pretty hard driving, it's showing nothing less than 20 kpl, which is truly something amazing. If you are frugal minded, this is certainly the one to go for. It's peppier too, and frankly, I think it's worth the stretch. Although it is quite weird that they haven't spec'd it up with all the features you get in the mild hybrid, and that includes ADAS, a big one. Speaking of the fuel economy, the hybrid is obviously rated the highest at an astonishing 28.65 kpl, but the petrol variants are also excellent. The manual is rated at 21.18 kpl and the automatic at 21.06 kpl, with the all-wheel drive rated at 19.07 kpl. The other thing of note is that this car, as I mentioned earlier, gets an all-black dashboard and seats. Frankly, I quite like that better, apart from the fact that it will withstand staining a lot better than the white upholstery. It just looks a little bit classier in my opinion. How then to sum up the Victoris? Maruti will tell you it's something fresh and new to appeal to Gen Z, which may be true of the design and the tech, but at its core, this is still the smart and sensible Grand Vitara wearing a new suit. It's just that it's now offered to a much wider spread of people across India, and that's really how Maruti will make up the numbers. But this is not a bad thing at all. The Grand Vitara is an excellent product, and so is this one. Plus, with the added bragging rights of 2 5-star NCAP ratings, it's come out of the gates with a solid appeal. And then there's the price. Yes, it's only introductory, but it is impressive. 10.5 to 19.98 lakh rupees ex-showroom is super competitive, and that alone will be enough for Maruti to move a lot of units this year itself. But will that be enough to topple the mighty Creta? Game on, Hyundai.